Hey, I'm Diana from the Fruit Grove, and this is my homemade potting mix. There are a lot of really great potting mixes available commercially that you can buy either at the garden center or you can order online. And they're going to do a great job for you. They're going to be perfect for growing fruit trees in pots. The problem is when we're talking about planting full trees in pots, they get pretty big and you're going to need a lot of soil, and that adds up. And so just making things a little bit more cost effective is always going to be a goal of mine. Now, admittedly, when you buy all of the individual ingredients for the potting mix, initially your investment might be a little bit more. It's going to cost you a little more than just buying a single bag of potting mix, but you're going to be able to make a lot more potting mix with all of the ingredients that you've bought. You're going to be able to make it stretch a lot further. But the main reason that I prefer to make my own isn't actually the money, although that helps. The main reason is that I can customize it to be exactly what I need for whatever I know I'm going to grow. For example, the tree I'm going to be potting up later is a fig tree. Now, fig trees, they're Mediterranean plants, so they love a really well-drained soil, very light mix, nothing that's going to get soggy or hold too much water. The roots of a fig tree are really vigorous, so the soil needs to be light and airy to give the roots room to do what they need to do. So all of these things I know, so I can customize my mix to be nice and light, to have a little extra of those aerating ingredients, and I know I'm providing what my plant needs. The other thing you can do is customize what things you add to it. For example, fig trees and many other fruit trees need a little bit more acidic environment. So you can add a soil acidifier to make sure the acidity of the soil is just right, is ideal for growing whatever you're going to be planting. I also like to add in my own slow release organic fertilizer. When you buy those potting mixes from the store, you never know exactly what fertilizers are in there. A lot of them contain high nitrogen fertilizers, which, although that promotes beautiful leafy growth of many ornamental plants, for something like fruit trees, that's not necessarily what you want. You don't necessarily overly want to feed the plant with nitrogen so that it becomes leafy. You want to also provide the things that it needs to produce fruit. Any good potting mix is going to be made up of a variety of ingredients, and they basically fall into three categories. You've got the things that aerate the soil and allow water to drain more freely through. You also have ingredients that hold water and retain it, so that way it doesn't dry out too quickly. And then finally, you have ingredients that are sort of additives, the things like fertilizer, compost to provide nutrition, acidifiers, or other specialty ingredients that you might be able to customize for the needs of your plant. Now, the main thing to figure out is the balance of the water retaining ingredients and the draining or aerating ingredients. So like I said, in my case for fig trees, I want it to be fairly lightweight. I want it to drain really, really well. On the other hand, I do live in a hot climate, and in the summer those pots dry out really fast. So anything that I can do to help that at this stage is a good idea. So I do want to make sure and include things that will hold on to the water. So the base of my mix starts with these pine bark mulch. You can also find this as pine bark fines, which is basically what it sounds like, a finer mix. If I was making a potting soil for house plants or just smaller plants, I would definitely want something finer than this. But these larger pieces are pretty good if I'm going to be potting up a tree in a big pot, because again, that's going to help with aeration. That's going to help the water to drain. So I'm looking for pieces probably roughly between a ½ inch to 1 or 2 inches is kind of what I want. When I dumped this out, I picked out a few of the really larger pieces to get them out of the way. But for the most part, that's what I have here. I'm going to do about 3 to 4 parts of that. That's about half this big bag here. This is a 2 cubic foot bag. I'm going to use about half of it for my mix today. The next thing I'm going to add is my perlite, and I like to do about 1 to 2 parts of perlite. So that would be 1/4 to a half as much as I put in a pine bark in here. And for me, I'm going to start with about 3/4 of a bag, and I'm going to see kind of how that works out and if I'm happy with the final result. The next thing I'm going to add is some manure, some composted manure. And again, this falls more in the water retention side of things, but it's also going to provide some good nutrition for my plant to feed on. So that goes next. I'm doing about 2 parts of manure, 1 to 2 parts of manure. The last sort of base ingredient I'm going to add is sphagnum peat moss, about 1 to 2 parts. And peat moss is super lightweight. When you buy it, it comes packed together in a giant brick. It's actually quite heavy, but it fluffs up. And that's going to really help lighten and aerate the soil. But peat moss also retains some moisture when it's damp. So it kind of works in both categories depending on how you look at it. But it's going to help retain some moisture. It's going to help just lighten the overall mix. Now I'm going to add in my granular fertilizer. I'm estimating I've got probably about 2 cubic feet of mix here. So according to my package instructions, I should use about 1 cup of fertilizer per cubic foot. So I'm going to put about 2 cups in. Now give it a good mix and see if you're happy with the result. If it seems a little clumpy, you might want to add extra perlite or a little bit more pine bark. If it seems like it's too loose or could be too aerated, I guess you could say, you can always add a little more compost. This is also the time when you can add in those other ingredients. So if you know your plant needs specific nutrients, if it might benefit from extra calcium or something like that, you can add different kinds of compost. You can add bone meal, mushroom compost, anything like that that's going to enhance this mix. But that's your basic proportions you want. So here we go. I'm happy with this. I'm going to do a pH test and test my acidity, see if I need to adjust it with that soil acidifier. But I think my fig tree is going to be pretty happy. Now the great thing is, I've made a pretty good amount of mix. This should be more than I need to pot up my fig tree. And I certainly can make more. I have extra ingredients, so I might actually make another batch. But with the extras, I like to just keep it in a plastic bin in my shed or in my garage, and that way I've got potting mix ready to use if I want to pot up cuttings that I've made, or if I just happen to come home from the nursery with another fruit tree, which has been known to happen, then I'm ready to go, and I have my potting mix all ready to go. So that's it. That's my homemade potting mix that you can customize to whatever you need. Get out in the garden and give it a try.